Hi everyone, welcome to Go Local Live. I'm Go Local News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for kicking off your start to the Friday afternoon with us here in downtown Providence. I'd like to welcome on regular guest columnist. You get the elbow, Bob.
Oh, that's right. Very dangerous. Don't touch your face. Don't touch your face. Which, of course, makes you want to touch your face. Yeah, then itching starts.
Robert Whitcomb needs clearly no introduction.
That's right. That's right. I'm bringing a whole new variety of coronavirus to the studio, along with some Dutch elm disease.
So, I mean, we have to kick off by starting with, the week that was, because this time last week we knew coronavirus was throughout the country, but we did not know here in Rhode Island, of course, now 2 presumed positive cases. They're also looking at a number of other potential cases, schools closed, a number of press conferences. Yesterday, though, we learned Mike Pence, Vice President, obviously.
Dr. Pence to you.
In charge of the response, says he believes that there are not enough test kits for the country. Now, yesterday at the Department of Health, they, at the press conference, said Rhode Island's fine. Let's look at the world view moving forward.
There are 330 million people in the United States. I'm not sure how many test kits they want to create. I mean, or they can create. The fact is that a lot of people are not going to be tested. I mean, for one thing, they have to show up to be tested. I suspect, especially, say, poor people live entirely on, minimum wage. They aren't going to go in and get tested. They need their jobs.
Well, I'll tell you, it was a point in the
They
press
say stay
conference.
home. A lot of people stay home. You get no money.
That was a point that definitely raised in a press conference yesterday.
Yeah,
and the governor,
serious. Millions of people who are living hand to mouth.
The governor said she'd been meeting with union leaders, especially, for laborers, hotel workers, and was really calling on employers, you need to address this in a fair and equitable manner. Like, these people need to know that they'll have jobs when they come back. But even that
freelancers. What about freelancers?
But 2 weeks salary
what
for
about
any number of families is a lot to ask if they're not going to get paid. So we'll see moving forward.
So, I think it's just so problematic. Also, our system is so fragmented. You've got the federal system, which has great aspects to it, but this varies tremendously by policy, state by state. You have a state like Washington State, which actually has a pretty good health system. They're challenged, deeply challenged. And, the coronavirus there is concentrated around Seattle, rich place, a lot of rich people, but they're being challenged. I don't know how you coordinate all this. Obviously, for political and other reasons, President Trump's very concerned about this. He wants to be seen to be addressing it, but I think there are grave limitations on how far you can go with this thing. I mean, how do you get the people to show up to be tested? Even the symptomology is up for some debate. We don't know that much about how it's transmitted. We know a bit about how much it's transmitted. We don't know how the fatality rate. We're saying everything from 1% to 3.5%, which is very high for something like this. I think with the great flu epidemic of 1918, by the way, written by the guy who lived in our house, I'm very important, John Berry. You ought to have him on GoLocal. It was 2%, but 2%, a lot of people in the world. So 2% is a lot of people. So you've got this fragmented system, local, even the cities, of course, the larger cities has health. So I don't know. I think probably what the government should do is perhaps give financial incentives to create on an emergency basis more test kits.
Well, we shall see. Here in Rhode Island, awaiting word back from those ones that they were testing as well. I mean, the key message that was coming out was obviously containment. Right. We'll see what this conversation looks like this time next week.
That's right. We don't know. It's moving fast.
It is moving fast.
There are a lot of people walking around with it. Hopefully no one in this studio right now, but with it, don't know they have it, and they're passing it on.
So speaking of looking forward, of course, Super Tuesday this week, the chips have fallen, and the Democratic primary has been whittled down.
What an irony. We're back to the guy who was the front runner last summer. And now what he needs to do now is have a joint press conference with Hunter Biden. Since the Republicans are going to recycle the Hunter Biden stuff, the Ukraine stuff. He did nothing illegal, but he sure did stupid stuff. So they're going to have to recycle that. If I were the Bidens, I'd have them both go on television together and talk about it.
So, what do you envision moving forward with, the Sanders v. Biden sort of construct? Bernie's chances?
Minimal, I think. I think the turnout issue is very important. All the young people say they love Bernie, but they still don't vote. They don't vote at a high enough percentage to get him through. It's really hard to see how he goes forward. And when you look at the range of states, with Biden winning in Massachusetts, defeating, it's kind of sad in a way, Elizabeth Warren, who I've always thought is the most intelligent person in the race, but victim of sexism, maybe to some extent. You could say the same thing about Amy. But I think going forward, one thing, and I'm guessing now, there's about a 70% chance that Biden will be nominated. He will almost inevitably pick a woman to run with him. Maybe Kamala Harris, who used to be a prosecutor and is pretty good on television. Obviously not good enough to be a very successful candidate in the primary, but I think in the general election. And she's on the other side of the continent too, which is good.
Well, we'll see moving forward. And as you said, young people in the turnout. Speaking of young people, a piece this week in GoLocalProv, a lawsuit filed against a Bryant University student for allegedly causing over $500,000 in damages from a frisbee hitting a sprinkler pipe.
Now,
is Ron Makeley in this meeting with the insurer saying, what's my premium now? Sue him.
With the ambulance chasing lawyers and sue him, right?
No, we're going to court.
He's been so well compensated. Why doesn't he pay for it? As we all know, they gave him, $6.5 million a couple of years ago. So
it's the rules are, you can't cause damage to the. But
we never thought of that when I was in college. I must say, did we even have frisbees when I was in college? But I know people threw footballs down this long corridor. It was a pretty anarchic situation.
Don't play ball in the house.
We had no residential advice. It was total anarchy when I was in college.
Were you sued for more than $500,000?
Just threatened. We settled. After the first deposition.
It was just an interesting legal development in the state this week in federal court. What can we expect from you this weekend?
Well, I'm going to talk, this is sort of hokey, we're going to spring, so I'm going to talk about dairy farms and how we want to keep New England dairy farms going, because for one thing, they provide a little bit of buffer for food shortages, because so much of our food, including dairy stuff, comes from agribusiness in the Midwest, the South, California, and so on, where they're vulnerable to supply chain issues, transportation issues. So I think not only because they're fun to look at, they're green and soothing to look at, but local dairy farms in New England, and New England used to be just dairy central.
Yes.
We ought to do what we can to keep them going. This has nothing to do with Trump or
this is apolitical.
It's apolitical, and it's kind of springtime. And buy their stuff, buy more of their stuff. The other thing, I came across something which probably is interest around here too, in Boston, which is that city planners and architects are looking at ways of limiting the wind tunnel effect. As they put up all these skyscrapers between, you've got these old 19th century ones and skyscrapers, this terrific, wind power problems, if you will, wind power without electricity.
Yeah, if you could harness that, that would be fantastic.
That'd be great. 50, 60 mile an hour winds between the skyscrapers. So it fascinates me.
Is it a big problem?
Yeah, it is a problem. Yeah, it's a real problem. Both downtown and the seaport area, of course, right on the ocean. So the wind's usually at a pretty good clip there. And so I think that's sort of interesting, especially since we're talking about the Hope Tower, which may or may not go up. It's a little bit different because that's going to be relatively solitary. The big problem you have with skyscrapers, the wind tunnel effect, is obviously, street, skyscraper. But I thought that was interesting. It may come into play here too if we ever build any new high buildings.
We shall see.
I hope. And then there's an interesting, to me, first of all, before I forget, Jack Welch. Should talk about Jack Welch. Made a lot of money for his shareholders, but a lot of his long-term bets weren't great, such as turning GE into a financial company, primarily a financial company, and that was catastrophic.
Parse the passing of Jack.
Absolutely. Never let anybody get between him and a camera. But he sure made a lot of money for his shareholders. I think he may be the last of a kind of a 30 or 40 year period of the imperial CEO. I think people are, they're
different approach now.
But some of his long-term bets weren't that great. Also, there's an interesting story, and I say this not just because I'm from, or I have family there, about diversity. Is diversity overrated? Ethnic and racial diversity, when you factor in the advantages of homogeneous populations too, such as the Scandinavian population of places like Duluth. And somebody somewhere, I think it was Bloomberg or somebody, did an interesting take on that, and I know a little bit about Duluth, and I understand what he's talking about. It's kind of civic. They drink a lot. That might be one reason it's civic. So
you're going to be talking about
yeah.
diversity.
Diversity, and then what's the other thing? Well, obviously the election.
You'll have to tune in. You'll have to read it on Sunday.
It goes on and on.
We'll be back here with more live on Go Local in just a little bit, but as always, we appreciate columnist Robert Whitcomb to come in and break down the week ahead.
Very good.
Week past, and what you can see on Sunday. So see us when we pop back up here on Go Local Live. I'm Go Local News Editor Kate Nagel.